One of the things that you said in the intro was that you've been shepherding this for a while. I noticed that you were at the Hamptons International Film Festival at the Screenwriters Lab. Yeah. Can you just walk us backwards in time a little bit to when you thought, and a little bit of background. What I learned a little bit about Annabelle is that you grew up in LA, right? But is also trained in acting. Yeah. And so tell us a little bit about the origin of the story and that process of, screenplay, lab stuff, and
Well, I grew up around the film business and was always interested in writing as well, but came up as an actor, and that was just always I was super shy, so I was interested in performing and taking on other characters. And so I started writing this simply because I think I struggled with codependent relationships with my own parents, and also within interpersonal relationships, and found myself in my own family dynamic taking on too much responsibility for the emotional bearing. So I was interested in what would happen if it was just a father and daughter, and how does that change the political implications, because there is something, when a girl turns 13, we see her as a young woman suddenly, and what happens when you are the doting father of that young girl, especially when she then goes on to take care of you. So I had all these questions when I was in college that I wanted to start outlining, but had no idea that I would be actually making the movie ever. After writing the film on and off for a few years whilst acting, I applied for the Hamptons Lab, and they bravely took a chance, and I had a great time. I highly recommend it. It exposed me to, many different takes on what screenwriting can be. I did IFP. I did a bunch of kind of labs because I didn't feel like I belonged in this world in some way, because I was coming from theater and acting. And then it took kind of 4-ish years on and off of writing, and then getting the project off the ground, casting it, and raising money for it to finally shoot it. She was just asking about the DP-director relationship and how much was influenced by him versus me. I would say it was definitely collaborative, but I came in with a really strong point of view. I felt pretty averse from making this a handheld blue-gray kind of gritty. I love Winter's Bone, and I didn't want to make this Winter's Bone. I wanted to do something different, because I do think there's a lot of joy in this town, and there's a lot of stuff to celebrate, and I hope the film comes off as slightly comedic at times as well. And I think I wanted to embrace that levity in the color palette and the way the film was shot. So we drew upon Eggleston and a lot of Stephen Shore and a lot of photographers of that era of Americana, and I guess tried to recreate something slightly bygone, because the town feels like an accumulation of many different eras of Americana in this amazing way.
So the film premiered at South by Southwest, and one of the things, there was an interview that, I don't know if the staff did it with you or what, that came out around that time, and you talked about a subtle abuse. You said subtle abuse can be the most terrifying. Mm-hmm. And I wondered if you could elaborate on that a little bit in terms of, I think, the story you're trying to tell about how addiction or mental illness or really any kind of chronic situation can have, can really spread its fingers into so many different lives. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit more about your thinking there, and I don't know, some of the situations that you dealt with in making the film that really brought that to light?
Yeah, well, because I think the subtler forms of abuse are not necessarily more terrifying than overt.
I could have misquoted you on that.
but I think that they're psychologically terrifying, because you're just constantly on a tightrope and you have no idea when someone's going to cut the cord. Like, you know, the person could explode at you at any second. And I think it was important to me with this to like deter from having Hank explode at her and hit her, and exemplify really overt forms of hurting her, and instead do it in these really twisted ways where he sprays her with a hose, and it can always be perceived as, oh no, I'm just having fun. To me, like that's what stops my heart. And so I don't know, I think that kind of dynamic is something that could be interesting to contribute in film, and that's why I went more in that direction with this.
And also, it's harder to name, or it's harder to maybe for her character to really, like, you know, it's harder to sort out, probably.
Yeah, well, and then that's what's interesting about that kind of behavior in this time that we're in right now, where it's all so on the forefront and on the tips of our tongues, where, you know, we're finally being empowered to name our abuse as women, and name times when we may have tolerated something that we actually were totally not okay with. And I think in Mickey's case, she's so numb to it all in a sense. You know, like Aaron is her boyfriend. She's just used to day in and day out kind of having these little microaggressions and stabs at her that finally, you know, come to a breaking point.
So where will you be next with the film, and what's kind of, that's always the last question. What's next? It's like this isn't enough. You need to be you need to have 7 irons in the fire and tell us about all of them. But no, just kidding.
We're playing in Maryland, in Montclair. We are in Acid Can, which is a smaller section of Can for basically smaller independent movies of first-time feature filmmakers like me. It's the only American film. And then after that, we play Nantucket.
So you'll be back in this
We're just
neck of
bopping.
the woods. Yeah.
We will. We're bopping around with the film, doing the tour. And then hopefully it'll be in theaters in the fall.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Is there any one part of this process that you are especially attracted to and you're like can't wait to do again?
Oh, all of it. It's the best. I also didn't mean to like say it's this like draining thing, which it is, but there's nothing more invigorating, especially when you're shepherding a story for so long, and you care so much about it, and you have producers and a team that's like game for your vision for it, and also inspired, I guess. So I'm super excited for the next one.